This is Andy Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by Dan Rafael over Zoom. Dan, it's always a pleasure. Before we come on to obviously the big talking point of the sport of the past 24 hours, how are you?
I'm doing probably better than Tyson Fury is right now.
I can imagine that to be the case, and let's just jump into the reason why you mentioned that. Because last night my time, I'm not sure what time it would have been for you, but we saw Tyson Fury overcome Francis Ngannou via split decision. A lot of debate online whether it was a right or wrong rewarding of the result. But what was your thoughts on the event and bout first and foremost?
I mean, obviously, it was a big event. I mean, the folks in Saudi Arabia made it a huge deal. They brought in all these great champions and tons of big stars and made it like a big pop culture event besides just a boxing match. But when the bell rang, the two guys got to go do the business. And so I thought it was a decent fight. It wasn't going to be in any kind of fight of the year conversation, but you got the moment. Anytime there's a fight, you want that dramatic moment. We got it in round three when Francis Ngannou did what was extremely unexpected, which is score a legitimate knockdown against the heavyweight champion of the world. And that sort of made the fight, obviously. But it was in the end, after 10 rounds, it was a close fight. Now, I didn't think it was super controversial. I just thought Fury just barely scraped it out, but he did deserve the win. I scored it 95 to 94. If you want to argue and tell me you thought that Francis should have won the fight by a similar score, I have no problem with that. But I didn't think it's like the controversy that some try to make it out. They go kind of go over the top. Uh, if you want to see a real controversy, we can come up with certain fights. Go watch Pernell Whitaker and Julio Cesar Chavez if you want a true controversy, that type of thing. Uh, but here's the thing, though. Even even Francis Ngannou kind of admitted like he didn't get the win in his post fight interview. But there's nothing wrong with that because he won the event. Let's say there's my dear friend Larry Merchant after Lennox Lewis had his great fight years ago with Vitaly Klitschko made what I thought was a perfect comment. Lennox Lewis won the fight and Klitschko won the event. And in the case of Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury won the fight close, but Francis Ngannou clearly won the event. And because he did what was unexpected. Everybody thought Tyson Fury was going to roll over Ngannou easily. A guy with no boxing experience making his professional debut, no matter how great of a mixed martial arts fighter he was, boxing is a different sport. And he went basically, even if he thought Fury won, he went basically straight up with the heavyweight champ, without ever having had a boxing match. And so Fury fought to a certain level that was unexpected. You have a champion that dramatically underperformed. You have a novice boxer, a great athlete, who, to the most people, dramatically overperformed. And when that happens, you end up with a close fight. So Fury, barely gets the win, but whose stock went up? Francis Ngannou's stock goes up in a big way. He'll wind up in the rankings probably, at least like in some of the organizations, probably, certainly the WBC. And you had a Fury who gets the win, stays undefeated, still has the contract in place for the Usyk fight, but his stock dramatically drops. Obviously, when you allow a guy who's never had a boxing match come in the ring and push around the heavyweight champ, put him on his ass, and have people wondering who actually won when it's over, and many complaining that he didn't deserve it. That's a nightmare for Tyson Fury. The only thing that was good for Tyson Fury in that fight was his bank account.
Dan, why or what would you instead what would you put it down to in terms of Tyson underperforming? Why do you think that he never delivered the type of performance everybody expected? Because interviewing everybody in the build up to this, the general consensus was the fight goes how Tyson Fury wants it to go.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, these are human beings, and I don't know about you, but there are plenty of days where you wake up and you might not be having your best day. You're just not at your best. I mean, whatever your task at hand is, whatever it is, whatever you do as your job. Sometimes you just don't have a great day. Maybe you don't feel so good. I mean, I'm just making the point that uh, in boxing or in any sport, you have that period of time. In this case, 10 rounds. 30 minutes to be your best, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So I think it could have just been that kind of thing. It could have been that maybe at age 35, coming off almost a year layoff, um, maybe taking the guy slightly lightly because of the fact that he didn't have any boxing experience. You put all those factors in. The Usyk fight is there. Maybe you're thinking a little bit about that and the 9-figure payday that's coming your way. In other words, there's a lot of different factors that can play into it, combined with the fact that you have a fighter like Francis Ngannou who sees this as a career-making kind of moment for him, who's trained his rear end off, who has huge desire, and you can never measure what's in the guy's heart in terms of wanting to go for it. And you put it together, and you wind up with a guy that didn't have a great night, and Ngannou, who did what he said he was going to do, go in there and basically let it all hang out, and show the punching power that he had such a big reputation for having from his UFC days. And what happened happened. Fury did not look good, obviously. I'll say another thing about Tyson Fury. He may have been undefeated and a heavyweight champ of the world, and a lot of people expect him to just blow the guy away like they've expected, to win easily against Chisora. He was obviously a heavy favorite against Dillian White, who are actual professional boxers. Don't make any mistake about it. The guy had those hard fights with Deontay Wilder, and even though he won officially two of them, the draw in the other fight, a lot of people thought he won all three. Those fights took out of Fury. Also, they were physical fights. You don't walk away from those type of wars unscathed. He was dropped 4 times, so we all look at the loser as a guy who's taken the damage. But guys who win fights take damage also, and that has an effect on fighters in the long run. And maybe some of it's catching up with Fury. It's been a long career. It's been a long layoff. It's been a hard life. We all know his background of what he's dealt with in terms of substance abuse and everything. I'm not saying he's doing substance abuse now. I'm just making the point that all those things take a toll after time. And he's reaching that age in professional athletics where you're maybe not at your best. There are freakish examples of fighters and other athletes that have done very well into their 40s. And, Bernard Hopkins was effective still into his 50s, but that's the rare thing. The common thing is when you get to 35-ish, you might be a little bit used up and not at what you were. Now, maybe that doesn't apply to Francis Ngannou, who's older than Tyson Fury and had a longer layoff than Fury from any kind of combat, was coming off of a big knee surgery. But you never know how the individual is going to react. But I would say to you that that Fury just looked about as bad in that fight as we've seen him in a long, long time.
What went through your mind, Dan, at that specific moment when Tyson was dropped in the third round?
I was like everybody else. I was like, oh shit. Like that was like a pretty big moment. That made the fight. Obviously, you want to see those kind of dramatic, unexpected things. That's what makes boxing such a great sport, because you're just so shocked when that happens. That said, I felt like, because the camera angle, they were right on Fury's face when he was on the floor. So when I looked at it, my immediate reaction was, okay, it was a legitimate knockdown. He caught him with the left hand, but it wasn't like a devastating knockdown where I thought that Fury's not going to be able to get up, or he's not going to be able to continue the fight, or he's badly hurt. I felt like the look on his face, he was kind of more embarrassed than actually hurt. But it counts as a 2-point round for Ngannou. But I didn't think he was. I didn't think he was at all hurt from the knockdown. So I just sort of figured he would dust himself off like we saw him do against Wilder in their fights, and come back strong and end up getting a knockout. It didn't happen.
I did an interview with Gilles Zhang earlier, Dan, and he called the performance of Tyson Fury and kind of how the entire bout unfolded embarrassing. Do you think that it was embarrassing for the sport?
It's not embarrassing for the sport because Tyson Fury doesn't represent the sport. So I know I listen. I've been hearing the boxing versus MMA dialogue since it first existed. So that's nothing new. There's always the back and forth about that. But I would tell you that no matter whether it's a boxer that does well someday in an MMA fight, or an MMA fighter like Francis that did a great job against Tyson Fury, it's only about the individuals involved. It doesn't reflect the entirety of the sport. So even if Ngannou had won the fight, yeah, I mean, it would have shown a bad light on boxing to many people. But I try to, keep things in perspective. The outcome of one fight like that does not represent the entirety of the sport. But yeah, it's kind of embarrassing more for Fury than for boxing, because you had a guy that's not a boxer come into the sport off of MMA and, do a great job against the heavyweight champion of the world, which was not supposed to happen. There was a reason why the odds were so huge, because no one really believed that Ngannou had an authentic chance to win. I think people respected him for taking the challenge, for putting himself out there like that, coming into a new sport. You got to respect that. He obviously is a great athlete. He has punching power, but I don't think anybody in their right mind figured he would be able to compete the way he did, much less win the fight. So when he's standing at the end of 10 rounds and you think maybe there's a chance he might have got the victory, you're like, okay, this is impressive. It opens your eyes. So even though I scored the fight by 1 point for Fury, I wasn't like convinced he won. I was like, yeah, there's a way you can find 6 rounds to give to Ngannou, and even less because he did have the 10-8 round in the third round with the knockdown. Um, but a knockdown is only one moment. It doesn't reflect every other round of the fight. It is still 10 3-minute segments you're scoring. So I have no problem with that result. But again, to answer the question again, as far as the embarrassment to boxing, no, it's an embarrassment to Fury, not an embarrassment to boxing.
Dan, we know since the fight has taken place, Frank Warren's come out and said that December 23rd will not happen now for that undisputed bout. So, just to your knowledge, what do you anticipate to see happen next? And just kind of on Alexander Usyk's front, he's come out questioning that, and Usyk saying, "Well, no, we've got a contract signed for the
Well,
20th."
no, Usyk is not. He's not. They do have a contract based on everybody's. I mean, not that they sent the copy to me, but if they'd like to, I'm happy to receive it. But by both sides, there's a signed agreement for the fight. But it was never locked in stone for December 23rd, and Usyk knows that because how could you lock in a fight for December 23rd not knowing what happens on October 28th, even with a Fury victory? Because he could have got injured. He, as it turned out, he did get cut. Not the kind of cut that you would think is going to cause any kind of crazy amount of issues there. I don't even think it was the kind of cut that necessarily needed stitches, but he still got cut. He still had a rough, tough fight. And so I don't think it's in any way a surprise that it's not happening on December 23rd. Even going into the fight, I never believed it was going to happen on December 23rd. I had an interview with somebody where they were we were discussing the possibilities of fights conflicting on December 23rd because of the prospect of Fury against Usyk, and then there was also the chatter that maybe Matchroom would do Conor Benn against Chris Eubank Jr. on December 23rd. My answer was, not only do I not believe that there'll be 2 fights on December 23rd, I'm very skeptical there'll be 1 fight on December 23rd. And now I think I'm going to be right because Ben and Eubank sure is not going to happen on December 23rd. And you're telling me that Frank is telling everybody that it's not happening with the heavyweights on the 23rd, so there won't be that fight. But again, Usyk and his team have this agreement. They know damn well that the 23rd was not locked in stone. Now, the Saudis who are bankrolling this fight knew that also, which is why when they announced the fight, they didn't put a date on it in their announcement. They would like to do the match before the end of their Riyadh Season Festival. The Riyadh Season Festival began, the opening ceremony, if you will, was the fight and the musical performances that took place during the between the end of the undercard and the beginning of the main event. But the festival goes through February, so they can again, I'm not sure what Tyson wants to do, but contractually, I guess the fight has to take place by the end of the festival, I suppose, which is sometime in the later part of February. So there's no question that they'll try to do that. We'll see what Tyson wants to do. I mean, he's still going to make decisions. I'm not entirely positive that the fight happens, but I suspect it will, just on a delayed basis, because Fury, even when he's had easy fights, is not a guy that like runs back to the gym on Monday morning. Some fighters, they have a fight and they take a few days off and they get back, even if it's not strenuous. Canelo Alvarez, he'll win a fight, take a couple days off, and like the next week he's back in the gym, not doing strenuous stuff, but he might be working out a little bit or whatever, take a little brief vacation, he's back in the gym. And a lot of guys are like that. Fury is not the guy that does that. He takes his time off, which is perfectly fine. You think after that tough fight he's going to want to go back in the gym in a couple of days or a couple of weeks? Even the fight would be 8 weeks to go in December, and even in January I think is still pushing it because he has taken time between fights. I don't know what made anybody think that Tyson Fury, who's never fought, back to back to back to back kind of fights, again, nothing wrong with that, was suddenly going to fight twice in 8 weeks. This is not 1950. That does not happen most of the time these days, particularly at the highest level of the sport.
Dan, just one question on December 23rd I want to run by you is, obviously you mentioned we've got Fury-Usyk and Ben Eubank Jr., which were being spoken about. Eddie also mentioned the possibility of Anthony Joshua fighting on that day. They've mentioned the likes of Manuel Char, potentially Hergovich or Wallin, if some type of deal could have been agreed with one of them, and one of them obviously stepping aside and what have you. Have you heard anything on an Anthony Joshua return before the year's out?
I mean, only from what Eddie has said, and the prospect that I think that Joshua broached in the post fight after he knocked out Robert Helenius, that there was the possibility that he would fight again this year. I mean, that would be okay. But to me, you know what? Let's dispense with the nonsense. Anthony Joshua had 2 quality fights this year to get himself back after the losses to Usyk. He's had 2 opportunities now to work with Derek James. He's had 2 full training camps with him, plus whatever time they spent together before the fights were actually made. You know what? Make the fucking fight with Wilder already. I mean, what are we doing here? That's the fight that everybody wants to see in the heavyweight division. I think it's a bigger fight than Usyk against Fury, especially after the way Fury performed against Ngannou. That fight should have happened 4 or 5 years ago. Wilder's team tells me time and again they'll do the fight, and they can talk all they want about how the money from Saudi Arabia is not there like they thought it would be. Okay, fine. So your giant pot of gold in Saudi Arabia is not there. Well, guess what? If you make a match between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, and you out there and sell the fight to the public, that fight will sell out any arena in the UK. That fight will sell out several arenas in the United States, whether you put that fight in New York City, you put that fight in Las Vegas, you could put that fight in Los Angeles. I mean, they're not going to do this. They could go to Deontay Wilder's, home area in Alabama, whatever. You can come to that fight would sell out here, in my area in Washington, D.C. That would be a very big fight. They would do a big gate. In any big metro market, they would do it well in a place in the United States and certainly in the UK. The Wilder people are more than happy and willing to travel to the UK to do the fight. That's never been an issue. So fine, you don't have the crazy artificial money from the Saudis. I'm not saying their money is not real, but it's not based on market factors. If you take the market into account, let the market pay what it's worth, they'll do a huge gate. The fight will do well on pay-per-view in both countries. That's the fight that should be made. I don't know why they're talking about other tune-up fights for Joshua. He had 2 quality fights in 2023. If anybody needs a tune-up fight, it's Deontay Wilder, who hasn't fought since last October. And even when he fought, it was 1 round against Helenius. And they're willing to jump in the ring with AJ in the next fight. So dispense with the nonsense. Make the fucking fight. What are we talking about? Both of the guys are near the end of their careers. They know it. But that's still the biggest fight out there, particularly because Fury can't fight Joshua now because he's contracted to fight Usyk. Joshua's not going to fight Usyk. He already got beat by him twice. There's no appetite from anybody for a third fight. I mean, what other big fight is out there for Anthony Joshua? That's the fight, Deontay Wilder. And I mean, and I saw something after the post-fight of Fury against Ngannou where Eddie was saying, do Anthony Joshua against Ngannou, we'd knock him out in 3 rounds. Well, Eddie Hearn knows damn well that Francis Ngannou has a contract with PFL in mixed martial arts. And if there was going to be any kind of fight for Ngannou in boxing, that made sense. If it could happen, it would be a rematch with Tyson Fury, not with Anthony Joshua next. The big fight for Anthony Joshua is Deontay Wilder, period. And it can happen if everybody understands that they can go out and sell this fight to the public. And maybe it won't be worth as much if they did it in Saudi Arabia, but it's still a big fucking fight.
Dan, just one final topic I want to get an update from yourself on is the current situation with PBC and their search for a new broadcast partner. Have you heard anything more recently about where things currently sit with them?
To be honest, I haven't. Just what we've talked about before. I mean, it's a open secret, if you will, that Al Heyman and is out there shopping for a new partner. That Showtime is going to close shop at the end of 2024 as or at the end of 2023, I should say. Unfortunate as that is, and they won't move forward with events in 2024. There was a story that it seemed to me was just complete nonsense, where on ESPN Deportes, which is the Spanish language version of ESPN's website, there was an article that said that even though they were going to close up after the end of 2023 at Showtime in terms of boxing and all of sports, that somehow in 2024, the 2 fights that Canelo would have, because he still has 2 fights left with PBC, that they would still produce and distribute those pay-per-views for Canelo. And I thought that was unusual. They didn't quote anybody other than sources. So I did like the most basic reporter thing that you can possibly do, not like make me special. I talked to the spokespeople at Showtime and said, hey, what about this report? And they laughed first, and then they gave me a statement that says, I forget what the exact statement was, but it was basically, no, not there are no plans for any boxing or any, and not even, I didn't even think they said the word boxing, plans for pay-per-view events at all of any kind in 2024. So I don't know why the person that wrote the original story didn't ask Showtime in the first place. So that was sort of like a random thing that happened. So yeah, where they're going to wind up, I have no idea, but certainly they've got a lot of great fighters and a lot of great fights they can make and great events. And I'm pretty sure knowing Al Heyman and the way he knows how to operate in this business, that he'll find something.
Dan, it's a pleasure to catch up with you today. I'm going to leave you to enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thanks for speaking to me, and I'll speak to you and hopefully see you again soon.
You bet, Andy. I appreciate it.